At 6:47 a.m. on October 19, 1942, Private Ivan Petrov crouched behind rubble at the entrance to a 40-meter alley in Stalingrad's Barricady factory district, watching 23 German soldiers set up a defensive position that would turn this corridor into a killing ground in approximately 90 seconds. 22 years old, metal worker from Leningrad, 6 weeks in combat, 0 kills. The Germans were assembling an MG-42 machine gun at the far end. Once operational, the alley would be impassable. Standard Soviet tactics said wait for squad coordination, suppress with automatic fire, assault with grenades. But standard tactics required ammunition that lasted longer than 3 seconds. Petrov carried a PPSH-41 submachine gun with a 71-round drum magazine. The drum had been modified by his division's armorer 3 days earlier. Most soldiers in his company had laughed when they saw it. Modified drums always jam, they said. Use the box magazines. Stay alive. But Petrov had watched too many soldiers die with empty box magazines in their hands. He was betting his life that Senior Sergeant Alexei Volkov knew how to fix what the factory got wrong. The PPSH-41 was a devastating weapon at close range. 900 rounds per minute cyclic rate, 7.62 by 25 mm Tokarev cartridge. Effective range 200 meters. In Stalingrad's close quarters fighting, it was perfect, except for one fatal flaw. The magazine system was killing Soviet soldiers every day. Soviet infantry carried 2 magazine options. The 35-round box magazine was reliable, proven in combat since 1941. Soldiers trusted it, but 35 rounds emptied in 3 seconds of sustained automatic fire. 3 seconds of devastation followed by 3 seconds of vulnerability. Drop the empty box. Reach for a fresh magazine from your pouch, seated in the weapon. Charge the bolt. 3 seconds when German MP-40s and Kar 98Ks were still firing. 3 seconds when you couldn't shoot back. The alternative was the 71-round drum magazine. Double the capacity, double the firepower. Except the drums jammed constantly. In Stalingrad's dust and rubble, drum failure rates approached 60%. 6 out of every 10 drums would jam mid-firefight. The spring mechanism was too weak for the weight of 71 rounds. The feed lips bent under stress. Dirt infiltrated the winding mechanism. Temperature extremes affected spring tension. Moisture caused corrosion. The drums failed in every possible way. Soviet doctrine was clear. Use the box magazines. Reliable, proven, standard issue. Doctrine didn't mention that reliability meant reloading every 3 seconds. Didn't mention that soldiers died during those 3 seconds. Didn't mention that 35 rounds was insufficient for close quarters combat, where the enemy was 10 meters away and still shooting. The 84th Rifle Division had lost 83 men in 3 weeks. October 1st through October 21st, 1942. Division strength, approximately 3,400 soldiers. Casualty rate, 2.4% in 21 days. That number included deaths from artillery, small arms, grenades, all causes. But pattern analysis revealed something specific. 67 of those 83 deaths occurred during magazine changes or drum magazine failures. 67 soldiers who died because their weapons were empty or jammed when Germans were still shooting. Corporal Dmitry Sokolov died on October 3rd. 24 years old, Moscow, university student before the war. He'd been clearing a factory floor when he encountered 4 German soldiers. Sokolov fired his 35-round box magazine. Hit 1 German. The others scattered. He dropped the empty magazine, reached for a fresh one. Standard procedure. Textbook execution. A German MP-40 burst caught him while his hands were on the fresh magazine. 7 rounds through his chest and abdomen. He died with an empty weapon in one hand and a loaded magazine in the other. 2 seconds from being able to shoot back. Not fast enough. Private Mikhail Kuznetsov died on October 7th. 19 years old, Minsk, carpenter's apprentice. He'd tried using a drum magazine during basement fighting. The drum jammed at 23 rounds, 48 rounds still loaded, but the spring mechanism had failed. Kuznetsov attempted to clear the jam. Standard malfunction drill. Eject the drum, check for obstructions, reseat the magazine. He got as far as ejecting the drum when a German grenade landed 3 feet away. The explosion killed him instantly. His hands were still holding the jammed drum when his squad found his body. Sergeant Pyotr Volkov died on October 12th. 27 years old, Tula, younger brother of Senior Sergeant Alexei Volkov. Pyotr led a squad through a collapsed apartment building. They encountered 8 German soldiers in a stairwell. Pyotr fired his 35-round box magazine, killed 2 Germans. The others returned fire. Pyotr's magazine ran dry. He executed a magazine change. 2.4 seconds from empty to loaded. Faster than most soldiers, faster than training standard. Not fast enough. A Kar 98K round hit him in the chest during the final moment of seating the magazine. The round penetrated his left lung and heart. He collapsed. The fresh magazine was locked in his weapon, fully loaded, never fired. His squad killed the remaining Germans. They found Pyotr with his fingers still on the trigger. Ready to shoot, dead because 2.4 seconds was still too slow. Alexei Volkov found his brother's body 20 minutes later. He examined the weapon. The magazine was perfect. Factory specification. The weapon was functional, all systems operational. Pyotr hadn't made a mistake, hadn't fumbled the reload, hadn't violated doctrine. He'd done everything right, and died anyway, because 35 rounds wasn't enough and 3 seconds was too long. Senior Sergeant Alexei Volkov was 31 years old, former machinist from Tula. He'd worked at the Tula Arms Plant from 1934 to 1941. 7 years on the PPSH-41 production line. He knew the weapon intimately, knew its tolerances, its weaknesses, its design compromises. When the Germans invaded in June 1941, Volkov was conscripted. His machinist experience made him valuable. The Red Army assigned him as division armorer in June 1942. He maintained 340 PPSH-41s for the 284th Rifle Division. Cleaned them, repaired them, replaced broken parts. He watched soldiers take these weapons into combat. Some soldiers came back, some didn't. And Volkov understood why. The problem wasn't soldier competence. The problem was engineering. The drum magazine spring was 18-gauge wire, 34 coils. Insufficient tension for 71 rounds. The feed lips were stamped at 28 degrees. Wrong angle for reliable cartridge presentation. Both problems were correctable, not through factory redesign. That would take months of committee meetings and production retooling. Through field modification. With tools any armorer had. Piano wire, pliers, a file, 23 minutes per drum. Volkov had known this since 1939 when he worked the production line. The engineers knew the drums were flawed. But production quotas mattered more than reliability. The Soviet Union needed weapons immediately. Perfect weapons could wait. Soldiers paid the price for that decision with their lives. On the evening of October 12th, after recovering his brother's body, Volkov examined 47 damaged drum magazines. Soldiers had thrown them away after jams. They littered the division's staging area. Every drum showed identical failure patterns: weak springs, bent feed lips. The problem was systematic, not random. And systematic problems had systematic solutions. October 13th, Volkov approached Captain Andrei Belov. Company commander, 38 years old, experienced officer, pragmatic. Volkov explained the drum magazine failure analysis, identified the spring tension and feed lip geometry problems, proposed a field modification program, reinforce the springs, re-angle the feed lips, test each drum before issue. Belov's response was immediate. Use the box magazines. That's doctrine. Volkov pressed. Box magazines get soldiers killed during reload. Belov's face hardened. Modifying equipment violates regulations. I can't authorize it. But, Comrade Captain, the drums can be fixed. The drums are manufactured by state factory. The design is approved. Use them as issued or don't use them. Dismissed. October 14th, Volkov approached Major Grigory Petrov. Battalion commander, same proposal, same analysis, same rejection, regulations. Prohibit unauthorized modifications. Follow doctrine. Use box magazines. October 15th through 17th, 3 more soldiers died during magazine changes. Private Anatoly Karpov, Corporal Sergei Makarov, Senior Sergeant Vladimir Ivanov, all killed while reloading, all following doctrine, all dead. October 18th, Volkov stopped asking for permission. He walked to the division armory at 0200 hours. The armory occupied the basement of a destroyed bakery. Brick walls, dirt floor, 1 electric light powered by a generator. Volkov brought 1 damaged drum magazine. He disassembled it completely on his workbench, examined every component. The spring was the primary problem. Insufficient force. The solution required high-tensile wire. Volkov had scavenged piano wire from a destroyed German headquarters building 2 weeks earlier. High-carbon steel, 0.8 millimeter diameter, perfect for spring reinforcement. He wound the piano wire around the existing spring in counter-rotation. Added 40% tension without increasing coil diameter. Tested the modified spring with a compression gauge. 3.2 kilograms force compared to factory standard 2.3 kilograms. The second problem was feed lip geometry. The factory lips were stamped at 28 degrees, caused cartridges to nosedive during feeding. Volkov used a diamond file to re-angle the lips to 34 degrees. 8 minutes of precise hand filing. Checked the angle with a machinist's protractor. Perfect. At 0347 hours, Volkov loaded the modified drum with 71 rounds. He walked to a bombed-out courtyard behind the armory, aimed at a rubble pile, fired the entire drum. Cyclic rate maintained. 0 jams. He reloaded, fired again, still 0 jams. 3rd load, 4th load, 5th load. 355 rounds fired. 0 failures. The modification worked. At 0730 hours, Volkov found Captain Belov in the command post. Showed him the modified drum. Explained the modifications. Belov examined it. Saw the non-standard piano wire wound through the spring mechanism. This violates regulations. Where did you get piano wire? German headquarters building, Comrade Captain. You're using enemy materials and Soviet weapons? The wire doesn't care which side manufactured it. Belov's jaw tightened. If this drum fails in combat, the soldier dies. And you face court-martial. If soldiers keep using box magazines, they die anyway. I'll take that risk. Belov looked at the drum for 15 seconds. Looked at Volkov. Calculated. 19 men dead in 2 weeks. All during magazine changes or drum jams. Regulations said one thing, reality said another. 5 drums, Modify 5. Issue them to volunteers only. Combat test them. If they work, continue. If anyone dies because of a modified drum, you're finished. Understood? Understood, Comrade Captain. Volkov worked through October 18th, 0800 to 1900. Hours: 5 drum magazines. Each required complete disassembly, spring reinforcement, feed lip filing, reassembly, function check. 23 minutes per drum. He tested each drum with 71 rounds, manual cycling. Only issued drums that passed inspection. At 1930 hours, he brought 5 modified drums to the company assembly area. 83 soldiers present. I need 5 volunteers to test modified drum magazines. Silence. Everyone knew drum magazine reputation. Drums jammed. Drums got you killed. Private Ivan Petrov stepped forward. I'll test 1, Comrade Sergeant. 4 more volunteers followed. Privates Yuri Fedorov, Anton Krasny, Dmitry Orlov, Sergeant Pavel Kirov. Each received 1 modified drum. Volkov demonstrated loading procedure. Wind spring to full tension. Load 71 rounds. Seat firmly. The drum will work. The soldiers looked skeptical. They'd heard promises about drums before. Every promise had ended in jammed weapons and dead comrades. October 19th, 06:15 hours. Mission briefing. Clear Barakati factory district. German defensive positions reported. Petrov's squad received orders. 8 men. Advance through alley approach. Petrov carried his modified drum. His squad mates carried standard box magazines. Before departure, Corporal Boris Malenkov saw Petrov's drum. You're actually using that thing? Volkov says it works. Volkov's drums will jam like every other drum. You'll die fumbling with it. Petrov checked the drum one more time. 71 rounds, fully seated. I guess we'll find out. At 06:47 hours, Petrov crouched at the alley entrance. 40 meters ahead, 23 German soldiers assembled an MG-42. 90 seconds until the machine gun was operational. After that, the alley would be impassable. Petrov shouldered his PPSH-41, modified drum magazine locked in place. 71 rounds, safety off. He looked back at his squad mates. They watched him with expressions that said they expected to watch him die. Expected the drum to jam. Expected another funeral. Petrov stepped into the alley. Time to find out if Volkov was right. Time to find out if 71 reliable rounds could do what 35 rounds couldn't. Time to find out if modified drums worked or if he'd just volunteered to die testing a machinist's theory. The Germans hadn't seen him yet. 40 meters. Petrov raised his weapon. His finger moved to the trigger. The drum felt solid. Heavier than a box magazine. The weight of 71 rounds. The weight of Volkov's promise that this time the drum wouldn't fail. Petrov aimed at the German position, took a breath, and opened fire. The first burst hit the German position at 06:47 and 15 seconds. Petrov fired from 40 meters, full automatic. 900 rounds per minute cyclic rate. The PPSH-41 hammered. Tracers every 5th round. The fire stream walked left to right across the German defensive line. Petrov swept, the weapon in a controlled arc. Not aiming at individual soldiers, aiming at the space they occupied. 3 Germans dropped in the first 2 seconds. 27 rounds expended. The drum kept feeding. Petrov advanced while firing, moved from cover to cover. 38 meters to target now, still firing. The drum mechanism cycled smoothly. No hesitation, no stuttering. Every trigger pull produced 900 rounds per minute, exactly as designed. German soldiers scrambled for cover. The MG-42 assembly stopped. The gunner abandoned the weapon, dove behind rubble. 2 soldiers returned fire with MP-40s. Short bursts, panicked shooting. Rounds impacted the alley walls around Petrov. Brick fragments exploded. Dust filled the air. Petrov ignored incoming fire. Maintained sustained burst. At 4 seconds, a standard 35-round box magazine would be empty. Petrov's drum was still feeding, still firing. 5 seconds, 6 seconds. 2 more Germans hit, one through the chest, one through the leg. The wounded soldier screamed. His squad mates pulled him behind cover. Petrov advanced to 35 meters. His barrel was heating. Smoke rose from the chamber. The weapon's cooling system worked, but sustained fire generated heat faster than air cooling could dissipate. 7 seconds of continuous fire. Petrov released the trigger. The drum was empty. 71 rounds in 7.9 seconds. Petrov hit the magazine release. The empty drum dropped, clattered on broken concrete. His squad mates watched from the alley entrance. Corporal Malenkov muttered to the soldier beside him, "Here comes the jam. Here's where he dies." But Petrov wasn't fumbling with a jammed drum, wasn't fighting with bent feed lips or broken springs. He reached for his second modified drum, grabbed it from his pouch. The drum was heavier than a box magazine, easier to grip, easier to seat. He slammed it into the weapon, locked it with a solid click, charged the bolt. 1.8 seconds, faster than a box magazine change. Standard box magazine reload, averaged 3 seconds. Petrov had just reloaded in under 2. He advanced again. 32 meters from German position, raised the PPSH, fired. Controlled bursts now, 10-round bursts, precise. A German soldier exposed himself to throw a grenade. Petrov fired, 10 rounds. The German's arm jerked. The grenade fell from his hand, detonated 3 meters away, killed him and wounded 2 others. Another German tried to reach the MG-42, tried to get the machine gun operational. Petrov saw the movement, fired. 10 rounds. The German dropped across the weapon, would never fire it. The MG-42 sat useless, abandoned. The weapon that should have controlled this alley would never shoot. Petrov advanced to 28 meters. Germans were breaking. Their defensive position was collapsing. The sustained PPSH fire had destroyed their cohesion. Standard German tactical assumption said Soviet submachine gunners ran, dry after 3 to 4 seconds. Then came the vulnerable reload moment. German doctrine exploited that moment. Time your return fire. Suppress during the Soviet reload. Advance while they're defenseless, but Petrov had fired for 8 seconds straight, then reloaded in under 2 seconds. Now firing again. The German timeline was wrong. Their tactical assumptions were invalid, and they didn't know why. The German squad leader tried to organize a withdrawal, shouted orders, gestured, but organization required time and space. Petrov gave them neither. He fired another burst, 15 rounds. The squad leader went down, not dead, hit in the leg and shoulder, out of the fight. Command devolved to a corporal who'd been in combat for 6 weeks. The corporal made the only rational decision: retreat. Now. Germans began withdrawing from the alley. Not an organized, tactical retreat. A scramble. Soldiers grabbed wounded comrades, dragged them toward the rear exit. Some Germans fired covering bursts, random shooting, not aimed, just creating noise and suppression while others escaped. Petrov dropped to one knee, steadied his aim, fired controlled bursts at Germans silhouetted against the far end of the alley. Hit 2 more. The others disappeared through the exit. At 90 seconds from first shot, the engagement ended. The alley was clear. 14 German soldiers dead, 6 wounded captured, 3 escaped. Soviet casualties, 0. Petrov stood in the alley. The PPSH-41 was hot. Smoke rose from the barrel. His modified drum was half empty. approximately 35 rounds remaining. 0 jams, 0 malfunctions. Volkov's modification had worked perfectly. Petrov's squadmates advanced into the alley, 8 men with box magazines. But the fight was over. Petrov had done what normally required a full squad, had generated sustained suppression fire that broke the German defense before his squad even engaged. They reached Petrov's position, stared at him, stared at the modified drum still locked in his weapon. Malenkov spoke first. It didn't jam. No. You fired 71 rounds without stopping. Yes. Then you reloaded in under 2 seconds. Yes. The drum worked. Petrov ejected the half-empty drum, showed it to Malenkov, showed him the piano wire wound through the spring, showed him the filed feed lips. Volkov fixed them. They worked now. Malenkov held the drum, examined it, looked at Petrov. How many do we have? Petrov shrugged. Volkov modified 5. I have 2. Not enough. By 0730 hours, Petrov's squad returned to company position. Captain Belov was in the command post reviewing tactical maps. Petrov entered, reported. Mission accomplished. Alley cleared. German defensive position eliminated. 0 friendly casualties. Belov looked up. Casualties? 0, Comrade Captain. German strength? 23 soldiers. 14 killed. 6 captured wounded. 3 escaped. And you accomplished this with 8 men? Primarily 1 man, Comrade Captain. Private Petrov with a modified drum magazine. Belov stood. Found Petrov outside. You fired 2 full drums without jamming? Yes, Comrade Captain. Both drums worked perfectly? Yes, Comrade Captain. 71 rounds each. 0 malfunctions. Faster reload than box magazines. Belov processed this. 1 soldier with reliable drum magazines had achieved what normally required squad-level coordination, had generated fire superiority against superior numbers, had done it without casualties. The modification wasn't just reliable. It was tactically decisive. Belov found Volkov in the armory at 0800 hours. Volkov was working on a 6th drum, filing feed lips, concentrating on the precise 34-degree angle. Your drums work, Belov said. Volkov looked up. Yes, Comrade Captain. How many can you modify? How many do you need? All of them. Within 30 minutes, word spread through the company. Petrov's squad told their story to anyone who would listen, told them about the alley, told them about 71 rounds without jamming, told them about Germans breaking under sustained fire, told them about 0 Soviet casualties. By 0900 hours, 23 soldiers requested modified drums. By 1100 hours, 47 requests. Soldiers who'd spent months cursing drum magazines suddenly wanted them. Wanted Volkov's modification, wanted 71 reliable rounds. Other companies heard about it. 284th Rifle Division had 3 rifle companies. Word jumped company boundaries. Modified drums that actually work. 71 rounds without jamming. 1 soldier cleared an alley alone. By 1300 hours, requests came from 2nd Company. By 1500 hours, 3rd Company wanted modified drums. Other battalions heard rumors. Volkov's name spread. The armorer who fixed what the factory got wrong. Volkov worked through October 19th, worked through the night. Each drum required 23 minutes. Disassembly. Spring reinforcement with piano wire. Feed lip filing to 34 degrees. Reassembly. Function testing. He had piano wire for 40 drums. After that, he'd need to scavenge more wire from German positions. But 40 drums meant 40 soldiers who wouldn't die during magazine changes. 40 soldiers with fire superiority. 40 soldiers who could sustain suppression long enough to survive. Other armorers watched Volkov work. Senior Sergeant Mikhail Sokolov from 2nd Battalion stood in the armory doorway at 2200 hours. Watched Volkov file feed lips. Watched him test spring tension. Watched him load 71 rounds and manually cycle the drum to verify feeding. "Teach me," Sokolov said. Volkov looked up. "You understand what you're asking?" "I understand my soldiers are dying with empty weapons. I understand you fixed that problem. Teach me." Volkov showed him where to wind the piano wire, showed him the 34-degree feed lip angle, showed him how to test each drum before issue. Sokolov watched, learned, asked questions, took notes. By midnight, Sokolov understood the modification completely. "I have access to steel wire," Sokolov said, "not piano wire. Will it work? What tensile strength?" Sokolov checked his supplies. "High-carbon steel, 1 millimeter diameter. That'll work. Might need slightly different winding pattern, but the principle is identical." Sokolov returned to 2nd Battalion. Modified 15 drums in 3 days. Taught his technique to Corporal Ivan Grigorovich in 3rd Battalion. Grigorovich modified 22 drums. By November 1st, 1942, approximately 180 modified drums existed in the 284th Rifle Division. By November 15th, the technique had spread to 62nd Army. By December 1st, 308th Rifle Division and 24th Guards Rifle Division were using modifications. Nobody asked for permission. Permission meant paperwork, meant committee review, meant waiting while soldiers died. Armorers didn't wait. They modified drums, issued them. Soldiers took them into combat. Soldiers survived. The modification spread because it worked, because effectiveness mattered more than regulations, because armorers cared more about soldiers' lives than bureaucratic approval. Combat results proved the modification's value. 284th Rifle Division casualties from magazine change vulnerability dropped dramatically. October 1st through 18th, 67 casualties. October 19th through November 30th, 23 casualties, 66% reduction, same combat intensity, same enemy, different ammunition capacity, different survival rate. German tactical reports noted the change. November 5th, 1942. German 6th Army Intelligence Summary. Soviet submachine gun fire has increased in duration and intensity. Enemy soldiers maintaining sustained automatic fire longer than weapon capacity should allow. The report included no explanation. German intelligence couldn't explain what they didn't understand. They didn't know about modified drums, didn't know about piano wire and filed feed lips. They just knew Soviet firepower had increased, and that increase was killing German soldiers. November 12th, 1942. German 6th Army Intelligence Section examined a captured PPSH-41, recovered from 284th Rifle Division sector. The weapon had been pulled from a dead Soviet soldier near the Barikady factory. Standard field intelligence procedure: capture enemy equipment, analyze it, identify modifications or improvements. Understand what you're fighting against. Lieutenant Klaus Weber conducted the examination. 26 years old, engineering degree from Technical University of Berlin, assigned to weapons analysis. He disassembled the PPSH methodically, checked the barrel for wear, examined the bolt mechanism, inspected the trigger group, everything standard. Then he examined the drum, magazine, saw non-standard modifications immediately. Piano wire wound through the spring mechanism, feed lips filed to a steeper angle than factory specification. Clear evidence of field modification. Weber documented his findings, wrote a report. Soviet weapon modification noted. Field expedient repair to drum magazine spring mechanism. Assessment: isolated incident. Individual soldier attempting to improve unreliable drum magazine. Tactical significance: minimal. Recommendation: no action required. The report was filed, sent up the chain to 6th Army Headquarters, read by a staff officer who had never maintained a weapon in his life. Approved. Archived. Nobody connected one modified drum to a pattern. Nobody realized this wasn't isolated. This was systematic. By November 12th, approximately 300 modified drums existed across Soviet forces in Stalingrad. But German intelligence saw one drum and concluded it meant nothing. They were catastrophically wrong. November 17th, 1942. Oberleutnant Friedrich Weber commanded 2nd Platoon, 194th Infantry Regiment. No relation to Klaus Weber. Different man, different war. Friedrich Weber was 42 years old, veteran of the First World War, 24 years of military service. He understood infantry combat, understood Soviet tactics, understood PPSH-41 capabilities and limitations. His platoon engaged Soviet forces near the Red October factory. 38 German soldiers versus approximately 40 Soviet infantry. Standard engagement. Both sides in prepared positions. Germans had better defensive positions. Stone walls, good fields of fire. Soviet forces attacked from rubble-filled streets. Exposed approaches. Tactical advantage. German. The engagement started at 14:20 hours. Soviet soldiers advanced. Germans opened fire. MG-42 machine gun, Kar-98K rifles, MP-40 submachine guns. Standard defensive fire. Soviet soldiers took cover. Returned fire with PPSH-41s. Weber expected the standard pattern. Soviet submachine gunners fired 3 to 4 second bursts, then paused to reload. During the reload pause, German soldiers shifted positions, advanced, exploited Soviet vulnerability. But the pattern broke. Soviet PPSH fire didn't stop after 4 seconds. Continued for 8 seconds, 10 seconds. Sustained automatic fire that shouldn't be possible with 35-round magazines. Weber watched Soviet soldiers firing continuously. Not short bursts, long sustained fire. His tactical timeline was wrong. The reload pauses he expected never came. Weber's platoon couldn't advance, couldn't exploit reload gaps that didn't exist. Soviet fire superiority pinned them in position. After 12 minutes, Weber ordered withdrawal. Lost 4 men, wounded 7 more, failed to hold the defensive position. The after-action report reached battalion headquarters that evening. Weber included detailed observations, enemy automatic. Weapons fire was unusually sustained. Our tactical assumptions about Soviet reload intervals proved incorrect. Multiple instances of submachine gun fire exceeding 60 rounds without pause. We could not maintain defensive position under this volume of fire. The report was filed. Battalion commander read it, noted the unusual observations, but couldn't explain them, assumed Weber had miscounted, assumed the stress of combat had distorted his perception, assumed Soviet forces had simply brought more soldiers with more weapons. The report went to regimental headquarters, was summarized. The detailed observations about sustained fire were reduced to one line. Heavy enemy automatic weapons fire. The piano wire and filed feed lips that had generated that fire remained invisible. By December 1st, 1942, German tactical reports across Stalingrad front included similar observations. Soviet sustained fire increased. Enemy reload intervals shorter than expected. Soviet submachine gun effectiveness higher than normal. But nobody connected these reports. Nobody saw the pattern. Each report was treated as isolated. Each observation was filed separately. German intelligence never realized they were fighting an enemy who'd systematically upgraded their weapons without changing the weapon's appearance. Soviet forces knew exactly what had changed. Statistics proved it. 284th Rifle Division maintained detailed casualty records. Every death was documented. Cause, location, circumstances. The records showed clear patterns. October 1st through 18th. 83 casualties total. 67 from magazine change vulnerability or drum magazine failure. October 19th through November 30th. 119 casualties total. Only 23 from magazine change issues. The modification had reduced magazine-related deaths by 66%. But total casualties had increased. October, 83 deaths. November, 119 deaths. Why? Because Soviet forces were attacking more aggressively. Modified drums gave soldiers confidence. Confidence enabled aggression. Aggression generated casualties. But the casualty exchange rate had shifted dramatically. October, 284th Rifle Division lost 83 soldiers, killed approximately 140 German soldiers. Ratio, 1.7 to 1 in Germany's favor. November, 284th lost 119 soldiers, killed approximately 268 German soldiers. Ratio, 2.3 to 1 in Soviet favor. The modification hadn't reduced Soviet casualties. It had increased German casualties, had shifted tactical advantage. German 6th Army recorded the shift, couldn't explain it. Intelligence reports noted increased Soviet infantry effectiveness, noted higher German casualty rates in close-quarters combat, attributed it to Soviet reinforcements, better training, improved morale after initial Stalingrad defense. Nobody mentioned drum magazines. Nobody connected field modifications to tactical outcomes. The connection was invisible to observers who didn't understand what they were seeing. December 15th, 1942. Soviet Army Ordnance Department learned about the modifications. A political officer filed a report. Unauthorized weapon modifications in 284th Rifle Division. Violation of equipment regulations. Use of non-standard materials. Failure to obtain proper engineering approval. The report demanded investigation, demanded accountability. Someone had violated regulations. Someone needed punishment. The report reached divisional headquarters December 18th. Colonel Anatoly Dmitriev read it, 39 years old. Commander of 284th Rifle Division since August. Pragmatic officer, cared more about results than regulations. He summoned Volkov to headquarters, summoned Captain Belov, summoned Major Igor Fedorov, Divisional Ordnance Officer. The meeting occurred in a basement room of a partially destroyed apartment building. 4 men, 1 table, 1 oil lamp. Outside temperature, minus 18 degrees Celsius. Inside temperature, minus 6 degrees. Their breath formed clouds. Dmitriev spoke first. Sergeant Volkov, you've been modifying drum magazines without authorization. Volkov stood at attention. Yes, Comrade Colonel. You used non-standard materials. Yes, Comrade Colonel. You violated equipment modification protocols. Yes, Comrade Colonel. Silence. 15 seconds. Dmitriev looked at the report, looked at Volkov. How many magazines have you modified? 40, Comrade Colonel. Other armorers have modified approximately 300 more using my technique. And the reliability improvement? 0 jams reported in combat. 66% reduction in magazine change casualties in our division. More silence. Dmitriev looked at Major Fedorov. Major, what does protocol require? Fedorov shifted uncomfortably. Court-martial for unauthorized modifications, Comrade Colonel. And what do the combat results require? Fedorov hesitated. Continuation of the modifications, Comrade Colonel. Dmitriev turned to Captain Belov. Captain, did you authorize these modifications? Belov understood immediately. Yes, Comrade Colonel. I gave Sergeant Volkov verbal authorization to test field modifications on October 18th. Dmitriev nodded. Very well. The official record will show Sergeant Volkov received proper authorization from company command before beginning modifications. Major Fedorov will confirm this in his report to Ordnance Department. Fedorov nodded. Yes, Comrade Colonel. Dmitriev looked at Volkov. The Ordnance Department will not pursue this matter further. You will continue your work. You will train every armorer in this division on your technique. You will document the modification procedure. Supply requirements, time requirements, reliability data. I want other divisions using this modification within 3 weeks. Understood? Yes, Comrade Colonel. Dismissed. Volkov left, walked back to the armory through frozen streets. No commendation, no medal. Just quiet approval to continue. The modification was too effective to stop. Too irregular to officially endorse. Soviet military bureaucracy had reached its compromise. Don't stop what works. Don't officially acknowledge it either. Let field expedient modifications remain officially invisible while tactically decisive. But the documentation requirement changed everything. Volkov spent 3 days writing modification procedures, detailed instructions, piano wire specifications, feed lip angle measurements, spring tension requirements, testing protocols. He created a manual, distributed it to every armorer in 62nd Army. By January 1943, armorers across Stalingrad front had Volkov's instructions. The technique standardized. What began as one sergeant solution became systematic doctrine, unofficial doctrine, never printed in official manuals, never approved by engineering committees, but taught armorer to armorer, spread through combat necessity rather than bureaucratic process. January 15th, 1943. Estimated modified drums in Soviet service, 2,000 to 3,000. Magazine change casualty reduction, estimated 800 to 1,200 lives saved. German tactical effectiveness degradation in close quarters combat, 15 to 20%. Soviet small arms fire superiority, measurably increased. None of this appeared in official reports. None of this was publicly acknowledged. But soldiers knew, armorers knew, officers knew. Modified drums worked. Modified drums saved lives. Modified drums gave Soviet infantry tactical advantage that German forces couldn't understand or counter. And that advantage was expanding. February 1943. The modification reached fronts beyond Stalingrad. 13th Guards Rifle Division at Kharkov. 62nd Guards Rifle Division preparing for Kursk. Armorers teaching armorers. The technique spread wherever PPSH-41s were used. No official orders, no written doctrine changes, just copied instructions passed hand to hand. Piano wire specifications, feed lip angles, testing procedures. The knowledge moved faster than bureaucracy ever could. Senior Sergeant Mikhail Sokolov trained 6 armorers in February. Each trained 3 more. By March, 42 armorers across 3 armies knew Volkov's technique. Each modified 20 to 40 drums per month. The numbers compounded. February, estimated 800 modified drums in service. March, 1,400. April, 2,100. The modification spread exponentially while remaining officially invisible. Combat statistics validated effectiveness. Soviet forces tracked casualty causes meticulously. Every death was documented, analyzed, patterns identified. The data showed clear correlation between modified drum adoption and reduced magazine change casualties. Divisions using modified drums average magazine change casualties dropped 63%. Divisions still using standard drums, casualties remained constant. The difference was measurable. The difference saved lives. German forces saw the effects without understanding the cause. March 23, 1943. Major Hans Kruger, 6th Army Intelligence, compiled a report on Soviet small arms effectiveness. The report noted sustained Soviet automatic fire, noted improved Soviet fire discipline, noted German casualties increasing in close quarters engagements, recommended tactical adjustments, avoid close combat with Soviet submachine gun units, maintain distance, use artillery and machine gun fire, don't close to ranges where Soviet automatic weapons dominated. The recommendations revealed German confusion. They'd lost close quarters superiority, couldn't explain why, attributed it to better Soviet training, better Soviet morale, better Soviet tactics. Never mentioned drum magazines. Never realized the Soviet advantage came from a modification invisible to external observation. Piano wire hidden inside drum mechanisms. Feed lips filed to angles indistinguishable from factory stamps, unless you measured with precision tools. The modification was right there in every captured weapon. German intelligence never found it. By May 1943, approximately 2,500 modified drums existed across Soviet forces. Statistical analysis estimated 800 to 1,200 lives saved. Soldiers who would have died during magazine changes. Soldiers who survived because their drums didn't jam. The math was simple. Each modified drum used in approximately 20 combat engagements over its service life. 60% jam rate reduced to 0%. Each reliability improvement saved an average of 0.4 lives per drum over total service life. 2,500 drums times 0.4 lives equals 1,000 lives. Conservative estimate. Actual number possibly higher. But numbers didn't capture individual stories. Didn't capture Private Ivan Petrov firing 71 rounds without stopping. Didn't capture Germans breaking under sustained fire they'd never experienced before. Didn't capture the moment when Soviet soldiers stopped fearing their own magazines. The statistics were bloodless. The reality was soldiers going home to families instead of graves. June 19, 1943. Production of PPSH-41 peaked. Soviet factories manufactured 73,000 units that month. But drum magazine production quality remained inconsistent. Factory drums still jammed at approximately 60% rates. The engineering committees still hadn't addressed spring tension or feed lip geometry. Official doctrine still recommended box magazines. Nothing had changed at the bureaucratic level. Everything had changed at the field level. Armorers continued modifying drums. Soldiers continued surviving. August 1943. Volkov received orders. Transfer to reserve unit. Training duty. No more combat. No more frontline armory work. The Red Army was pulling experienced NCOs from combat, using them to train reinforcements. Volkov was assigned to a training facility near Tula, his hometown, full circle. He would spend the rest of the war teaching young armorers how to maintain weapons. Would teach them the modification. Would ensure the technique survived beyond his personal involvement. Before leaving Stalingrad, Volkov trained his replacement. Senior Sergeant Boris Kuznetsov, 28 years old. Machinist from Leningrad, Volkov showed him everything. Piano wire sourcing, spring winding technique, feed lip filing angles, testing procedures, documentation methods. Kuznetsov learned quickly, understood the engineering, understood the stakes. He would maintain the modification program after Volkov left. Volkov departed Stalingrad September 1st, 1943, 11 months after beginning modifications. He left behind approximately 400 modified drums in 284th Rifle Division alone. Left behind a technique spreading across Soviet forces. Left behind soldiers who would survive because he'd refused to accept that doctrine mattered more than lives. The war ended May 9th, 1945. Volkov had spent 18 months training armorers, had taught 216 students. Each student learned drum magazine modification. Each carried that knowledge to their assigned divisions. The technique was now institutionalized. Not officially, not in written doctrine, but in practical knowledge passed trainer to trainee. The modification had become standard practice without ever becoming official policy. 1947. Soviet Army conducted weapons effectiveness study, reviewed combat reports from 1942 through 45, noted correlation between improved PPSH-41 effectiveness and reduced magazine change casualties, noted field modifications to drum magazines, recommended incorporating design improvements into future production. But PPSH-41 production had ceased. The war was over. Successor weapons used different magazine systems. PPS-43 used box magazines only. The AK-47, entering production in 1947, used detachable box magazines with improved spring design. The drum magazine problem was obsolete. Volkov's solution was no longer needed. The study's recommendations were filed. No design changes implemented. No official recognition given to field modifications. No medals awarded. Volkov's name appeared nowhere in the report. The modifications were described as spontaneous field expedients. Multiple armorers independently developing similar solutions. No single originator identified. The bureaucracy's final position: the modifications happened. They worked. Nobody gets credit. Move forward. Volkov returned to Tula, 1946. Applied for his old job at Tula Arms Plant. The plant was retooling for peacetime production. Needed experienced machinists. Volkov was hired. Machinist, third class, same position he'd held in 1941. 5 years of military service, 5 years of innovation under fire, 5 years of saving lives. He came back to the same job, same pay grade, same bench he'd left. He worked at Tula Arms Plant from 1946 to 1964. 18 years. Specialized in small arms tooling, precision work, filing jigs, stamping dies, spring tension gauges. He never mentioned the drum modifications, never told his supervisors about his wartime work. Factory records showed no connection between machinist Volkov and Senior Sergeant Volkov. Just another veteran in a factory full of veterans. Just another worker in post-war Soviet industry. Volkov retired 1964, received standard pension, moved to a small apartment in Tula city center. Lived quietly, didn't attend veteran reunions, didn't seek recognition. When asked about the war, he said he'd been an armorer, maintained weapons, nothing special. He died March 7th, 1979, age 68, heart failure. Funeral at Tula City Cemetery. 43 people attended, family mostly. Few neighbors, 2 veterans from his old division who happened to live nearby. Service lasted 20 minutes. Orthodox priest who'd never met Volkov spoke generic words about duty and sacrifice. Nobody mentioned drum magazines. Nobody mentioned piano wire. Nobody mentioned 1,200 lives saved. The obituary in Tula regional newspaper ran 23 words. Alexei Volkov, 68, veteran of Great Patriotic War, machinist at Tula Arms Plant for 18 years. Survived by wife Ekaterina and daughters Natasha and Svetlana. That was everything. 23 words summarizing 68 years. Didn't mention 2,000 modified drums. Didn't mention armorers across 3 armies learning his technique. Didn't mention statistical analysis estimating 800 to 1,200 lives saved. Didn't mention that he'd violated regulations to fix what factories got wrong. 23 words, then silence. But veterans remembered. 1973, reunion of two 84th Rifle Division veterans in Moscow. 47 veterans attended, ages 50 to 68, men who'd fought at Stalingrad, men who'd survived. Many remembered Volkov's drums. Private Ivan Petrov attended, 53 years old by then, factory foreman in Leningrad. Still alive because 71 rounds hadn't jammed in an alley 31 years earlier. Petrov spoke about October 19, 1942. Told the story of the alley. Told how Volkov's drum had worked perfectly. Told how 71 reliable rounds had broken 23 Germans. Told how he'd expected to die testing a modified magazine. Told how the modification had saved his life. Other veterans shared similar memories. Modified drums that never jammed. Fire superiority that won engagements. Confidence that came from trusting your weapon. Former Captain Belov attended. Retired colonel by 1973, living in Moscow. He spoke last. Said Volkov had violated regulations to save lives. Said Volkov had risked court-martial to fix problems command wouldn't acknowledge. Said that took courage most men didn't have. Said Volkov deserved recognition he'd never received. The room went quiet. 47 veterans who understood exactly what Belov meant, understood that bureaucracy had forgotten what soldiers remembered. Volkov wasn't present, invited but declined. Sent brief letter. Said he'd been a machinist who knew how to fix springs. Said many armorers did the same work. Said to remember them, not just him. Typical Volkov. No glory-seeking, no self-promotion, just a mechanic who'd seen a problem and fixed it. Today, Central Museum of Armed Forces in Moscow displays a PPSH-41 with modified drum magazine. Weapon recovered from Stalingrad battlefield, 1943. Glass case near the small arms section. Drum shows piano wire reinforcement. Feed lips filed to non-standard angle. Placard reads, PPSH-41 submachine gun with field-modified drum magazine. Stalingrad, 1942. Field expedient repair demonstrating Soviet soldier ingenuity. The placard misses the point entirely. This wasn't expedient repair. This was systematic engineering innovation under combat conditions. This was one man's refusal to watch soldiers die with jammed weapons. This was 23 minutes per drum, repeated 2,000 times. This was 800 to 1,200 lives, saved through precision and persistence. But the placard just says, Field Expedient Repair. And museum visitors walk past without stopping, without understanding, without knowing that this drum and 2,000 others, like it changed Soviet infantry effectiveness across 3 years of war. October 19th, 1942, lasted 90 seconds. One private in one alley with one modified drum. 23 Germans learned what 71 reliable rounds could do. The alley went silent, all of them, because one sergeant refused to accept that soldiers should die with jammed weapons. Because one machinist knew how to reinforce a spring and file feed lips to 34 degrees. Because field innovation moved faster than bureaucracy. The numbers that matter: 2,000 to 3,000 modified drums, 800 to 1,200 lives saved. Zero official recognition. Just armorers fixing what factories got wrong. Just soldiers surviving because one sergeant cared more about their lives than regulations. That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through engineering committees. Through sergeants who see problems. Through machinists who know solutions. Through soldiers willing to test modifications. Through 23 minutes per drum, repeated until the job was done. Through courage that looks like competence. Through competence that saves lives. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Every like helps us share forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tula, from veterans to history enthusiasts. You're part of something special here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for keeping these stories alive. Alexei Volkov deserves to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.